Happy New Year, everyone. Happy New Year, same as the old year. So privileged to have author, journalist Leo Hohmann to talk to today and get some predictions about the upcoming events in the new year. It's time to start thinking about what's going to happen to us next and what we might do to protect and defend ourselves. Happy New Year, Mr. Holman. And you've been writing very prolifically about 2024 and lots of fantastic predictions you have. Can you uh, shed some light on what's going to happen next?
Yeah, I posted an article the last day or two of December 2023, Wes, talking about some of the trends or scenarios. I would say definite trends and possible scenarios. How's that? uh, for 2024. Um, and I guess we could start with the election. A lot has happened just in the 3 weeks since I wrote that article regarding Donald Trump. I mean, DeSantis dropped out yesterday and endorsed Trump. Now we have today the big news is that Boris Johnson, the former prime minister of the UK, has come out and said, quote, the world needs Trump, unquote. Boris Johnson, I don't know how familiar you are with that guy, but he is a deep state con man from way back. Um, he is the one who flew to Kiev and scuttled a deal between Zelensky and Putin in April of 2022, about a month or two after that war got started. The deep state flew Boris Johnson to Kiev to tell Zelensky to not agree to that deal, which he was ready to sign. It was a wonderful compromise between Ukraine and Russia, and it could have averted the nasty war that we've seen ensue. But we know that this war has been by design the entire time by the globalists. This is a war that they want very, very badly. And that's why we are almost, what are we, almost 3 years into it now? I think we are. Uh, all of 2022, all of 2023. I guess we're a little over 2 years, but you know,
Yeah.
they've scuttled every potential peace deal that's come. They've done everything possible in their power, Washington and London, to make sure that that war continues. Right down to the last Ukrainian, as some people say. Let's sacrifice more Ukrainian lives. And we keep hearing this propaganda that Putin is damaged, Putin is hurting, Putin is going down. That's all lies. Russia is stronger than ever. They are now battle hardened. They've worked out a lot of the kinks in their military with this war. And, you know, for every one Russian that is killed, there's 5, 6, 7 Ukrainians being killed. And Russia has a larger pool of men to draw from to begin with. So even if it were 1-for-1, which you'll hear the deep state say that it's the opposite of what most of the truth tellers are saying. But even if that were the case, 1-for-1, Russia could continue that for years because they have a much, much larger pool of manpower to draw from. So that's going to continue. That's going to expand, I said, and we've seen it expanding in the Middle East with the Houthis now making the Red Sea basically a no-go zone, right?
Right.
A no-go zone for Western ships or anybody who has ties with Israel. And so that's heating up. We've seen Taiwan, since I wrote this article, just last weekend, a week ago, Taiwan elected a uh, a nationalist leader who is against reunification with China. And so that exponentially increases the chances that China will indeed make a strike against Taiwan. They'll probably start with a blockade around the island. And Joe Biden has pretty much said he's not going to do anything to defend them. I don't know if we can believe that or not, or what. So you've got Trump rising, you've got war drums beating. I am convinced now that Donald Trump is going to be elected president. One scenario I pointed to that could be possible is that he gets elected and the deep state globalists who run everything pretty much in this country. That's what people don't understand, Wes. Right. They run the media. They run the federal bureaucracy. They own the federal bureaucracy. Okay. Right. They own the military. They own the education systems of the entire 50 states.
The CIA directly involved in indoctrination at the education.
Absolutely. Yeah. If your state is taking federal funds from the U.S. Department of Education, it is captured. It is conquered. And there's not a single state that says, oh, no, we don't want your money. Okay. Right. So they own the educational system. They own the media. They own the military. They own the federal bureaucracy. I would say they own the state bureaucracies because it's the same deal. Most states have 20 to 30% of their state budgets underwritten by federal dollars.
And it's down to the city level as well, with the city councils being manipulated by federal policy. So each city council has a supervisor locally from the federal level that tells them what to do.
You're exactly right. And in Georgia, even the school board members, if you're a newly elected school board member, you go for several months of training where they basically teach you that you are a nobody and you will just do what the superintendent tells you to do.
Right.
They literally tell them you do not represent the people of your county, your school district.
That's right.
You are there to do to take all of the recommendations wholesale that your superintendent gives you.
Here it's called the Blandin Foundation in the Midwest or Minnesota. The Blandin Foundation takes our politicians to training camps and teaches them what they're going to do to administer the wishes of the deep state.
Yes. Here, I believe it's something called the Georgia School Board Association or something. It's a statewide association of indoctrination for school board members. Where they basically tell them the state and your local superintendent is who you work for. And the state is underwritten by the feds. So this is my point. These school districts can't afford to lose 20% of their funding from the state or another big, huge chunk from the feds. So you take the feds and the state away, and a local school board would be left with just the local money, and that would be like half or less of what they need, or they think they need. So my point is, all of the major institutions, and even Hollywood and the entertainment industry is owned by the deep state. So you've got the propaganda coming through, Fox News, CNN, Newsmax. Even Newsmax is completely corrupted, in my opinion.
Maybe you could throw in the medical industrial complex.
Yes. Thank you. That was the other one I was forgetting. They proved during COVID that our entire medical system is now taken over by the feds, and they can dictate how your doctor will treat you for a given illness. It's unbelievable. That would not have existed even 10 or 12 years ago. But they've proven that now that is the case. They've even conquered the medical establishment, where doctors can lose their license to practice if they don't follow dictate A or dictate B, coming down from the CDC and the WHO, World Health Organization, which is now scheming to to make themselves even more powerful with the pandemic treaty.
That's right. The World Economic Forum is going on with that information right now. The WHO wants to roll out new controls over information that's disseminated, what are good practices your doctor will undertake, and then also how they'll control the spread of information that they determine will be disinformation or
Yes,
misinformation, right? If you look at the board
exactly.
of directors, yeah, this lawsuit's
The new name for truth is disinformation, right?
right.
So they're getting ready to clamp down big time on all of that on the internet with the digital ID system that they have all worked up and ready to go. I think they just need a new major crisis in order to make people desperate enough to accept it. But
Would
my
that
point
be in
is
the form of
this. My point going back to my original point is this. The globalists own everything. But the one thing they lack is numbers. They are outnumbered by people like us. And so they have to be very careful on how they roll these things out. That's why they usually roll them out. Any major changes in the structures of the world order and the structures of the way our day-to-day lives are affected by government and business, all major changes typically get rolled out on the back of a crisis because they have to be very careful that they don't move too fast, especially during good times of normal times, I should say, not necessarily good times, but normal times. And so people are waking up, okay? And so
yes,
they have to be even more conscious of not moving too fast in lieu of a major crisis that would what? Take our focus off of them and we would have to focus on just how to survive day to day, right?
right.
How to keep how to keep the lights on, how to keep food on our table. This would literally consume us if we have an economic meltdown or a major cyber attack or potentially World War III or even, should I say, Civil War. I
Or a
think,
border crisis,
yes, a
perhaps.
voting crisis, right? But my point is, uh, even if Donald Trump is elected, see, Americans are so naive and they do not understand the way the system, A, has been corrupted, and B, how it works. They know maybe how it's supposed to work, but those days are long gone. One man cannot change the system. The system is so corrupted that Donald Trump, even if he's everything that we think he is, and I don't, by the way, believe that he is, I believe that Donald Trump is for Donald Trump. And if it behooves Donald Trump to change position on an important issue, he will do it. He has already shown his propensity to do this. He's softening his position on pro-life. He's now said that, this heartbeat thing where, 20 states have heartbeat bills, and that's just too radical. That we have to compromise on the issue of human life. And you now see J.D. Vance, who's a big Trump supporter, came out yesterday and said that 15 weeks would be a good point to compromise on. A woman up to 15 weeks should be able to get an abortion when the fetus, quote unquote, can feel pain. That's when the unborn baby can feel pain. Now, the devil is laughing at this. I mean, we now have Republicans talking about allowing abortion up to 15 weeks and deciding in their puny little minds when an unborn child can feel pain and it's okay to euthanize him. That is disgusting and pathetic. But this is now the position of Donald Trump. We also know that he's willing to compromise on the gun control issue. He has been in support of red flag laws, which in my opinion are the most sinister of all gun control laws because they could willy-nilly come after anyone, you or me, with no evidence and
Right.
no due process.
Just
See,
hearsay.
they can, let me finish. They can seize your guns and worry about whether you deserve to have your guns taken away later. No due process until after your guns are taken. Now you tell me what could be more tyrannical than that when it comes to gun control. All these other things that the Democrats want to do, waiting periods, background checks, that is minuscule compared to the red flag laws.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it just involves rumor and conjecture.
Yes.
And it's a provocation to make people overreact, and they keep hoping that someone does. Is civil disorder? I mean, before we reach the point where, dare we say, civil war, but we seem to be on a slippery slope toward it, because the last president who was removed from ballots was one Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
And then 6 or 9 months later, America was embroiled in a civil war, a clash between economic systems, really, again, under globalist control on both sides. But could we have some kind of staged civil disorder in the United States where they claim that an extremist did this or that? By the way, we never get the manifestos of those Trunies that shoot up the schools. We never see their manifestos, right, although they are clearly doing the devil's work in shooting up what it's unmentionable, but we never see their writings about what they call for and the violence. Also, could disease X, the World Economic Forum in Davos is meeting right now, and the WHO seems very happy to talk about disease X, which I think is like a poke at Elon Musk in a way for renaming Twitter X. But disease X, they don't know if it's a fungus, a bacteria. They don't know if it's a virus. They're already developing a super duper safe and effective so-called vaccination for it, although they don't even know what the contagion is supposedly meant to be. But could they roll out some new way to enforce lockdowns or masks on us?
Yeah, I guess they have some kind of occultic crystal ball, right? Because they don't know what it is, but they say they're preparing a vaccine for it, and they say that it will be 20 times more deadly than COVID. So if you don't know what it is, how would you know how deadly it is, right? Right down to the factor of 20. They have that all. They have all this knowledge about it, and yet they say they don't know what it is. So either you're lying, you're either lying that you don't know what it is, and you've already got it in your back pocket, ready to disperse it, or you're lying, you don't know what it is, but you're just lying to for the sake of fear mongering people, right? And saying this unknown thing that's coming is going to be 20 times more deadly than COVID. Be very afraid. Be very afraid. Get ready to put your mask on. Get ready to take a vaccine. Either way, they're lying. And
they are lying, and if they're so concerned about it, why are they letting people pour over 10 million people, flooding the United States of America who are unvaccinated, and just letting them pour? There's actually an experimental vaccination for a so-called Ebola vaccination that is an experimental thing being rolled out in Texas, and that sounds like something you definitely want to. I mean, I'm not giving out medical advice, but I would just stay far away from something like that. Just try to eat healthy, stay healthy, work out once in a while, laugh with your friends, stay healthy, because we're going to all need to be healthy in this year to come. Whatever we're in store for.
That is great advice, Wes. They also want to regulate supplements. That the FDA is itching to get its hands on supplements because they know that helps people stay healthy. We can't have that, right? So if you take your supplements, your vitamin C, your vitamin D, your quercetin, your vitamin A, and zinc. Zinc is another very important one. If you take those supplements and you exercise and you get out in the fresh air and get the sunlight, that's another lie that sunlight is bad for you. people slather this sun protective stuff, and it's loaded with chemicals. That is worse for you than the sunlight. The sunlight is vitamin D. It's actually
Yeah.
good for you. Yes, you can overdo it. You shouldn't sit out on the beach for 6 hours a day in the mid of summer. But sunlight, an hour of sunlight a day is probably the most healthy thing you can do.
Kills microbes, it kills fungi.
Yes,
So the
yes,
sunlight is the best. Your grandmother would have let you know it's the best disinfectant next to vinegar and baking soda.
exactly.
You know,
Exactly. And
you
that's
still,
another good point. Stay away from these chemical cleaning ingredients. Use natural cleaning ingredients like vinegar. Uh,
right.
and stay away from these harsh chemicals. They are poisoning us with the cleaning supplies, cleaning chemicals, the processed food, the chlorinated water, and fluoridated chlorinated water. That is, and also plastic bottles. People
Right.
drinking all of their water out of plastic bottles, they're ingesting all of those microplastics. And over the course of years, I'm not saying if you have one now and then it's going to hurt you, but if you're drinking bottled water regularly for over the course of years, you are loading up your body with toxic, cancer-causing microplastics.
And not only that, Leo, but if you're spending $8 on a bottle of smart water, I don't think it's working very well.
Right. Right.
Everything's getting more expensive. Our food is more expensive. We're living in virtual food deserts here in Minnesota. We're an agricultural state, but we pay a premium even for potatoes and carrots. I just can't fathom it. It's strange to see how and people do complain about the prices, but nobody's making the connection between inflation, and we all warned them about that 9 months in advance at the end of the last administration. But when inflation hit, prices went up. Now there's fewer choices, there's fewer options in the markets of what you can buy. So there's a lot less choice, but people aren't making the connection between that and the systematic destruction of the takedown of the United States of America. And this gets into your article, your writing, the takedown of America. Can you talk a little bit about that piece? Because this is a systematic, what people don't understand is you can't bring down a country this fantastic by chance or by accident. They're
I'm
hobbling
sorry, you can't bring down, what did you say?
a nation this fantastic by accident. You can't, a country this wonderful can't be hobbled just by chance and happenstance. Our economy is being systematically detonated.
Yeah, I mean, the United States is blessed with amazing geography.
Yeah.
It's surrounded by oceans and friendly neighbors to the north and to the south. And so the only way to conquer, if you're let's start with the globalist mindset. If your goal is to conquer the world, meaning that not that you would necessarily have a literal one world government, but you would have a one world system where all governments are subservient to the globalist elites.
Right.
Uh, there are two, what I would say are largely Christian countries that are strong enough to stop that. That
Right.
would be the United States and Russia.
Right.
So these are the two biggest impediments to the establishment of the Great Reset, which is just a rebranding of the New World Order. This one world system controlled in a sort of what I call a high-tech oligarchy. Okay.
Yes.
Or a techno-communism or technocracy, as someone like Patrick Wood would call it. But I like the term high-tech oligarchy because it's a return to a feudal system. If you recall the old feudal system, you had the landed gentry, right? You had the nobility, and they controlled the serfs. The serfs worked the land, but they didn't control the land. They didn't control their own destiny. They were simply almost like indentured servants.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I think the globalists, if you look at the wide span of history, this has been the case for the overwhelming majority of human history. It's only been the last 200 or 300 years, which is 200 or 300 years. I'd say about 250 years is like a blip on a screen. That is nothing in the term of all of human history. And it's only
Yes.
been about 250 years where we've had this grand experiment with what they call democracy, right?
Right.
In the United States, it took the form of a constitutional republic. Um, and I think Western civilization, with the dominance of Christianity, is what led to that.
Yes.
And so they know that in order to end this experiment, and return to a more oligarchical system, which an oligarchy, for your listeners who maybe aren't that up on history, is nothing more than rule by the few, rule by a governing elite. That's an oligarchy. And you throw today's technology into it, and it takes a different form. It's not going to be like the old feudalism, where you have, the masses literally working out in the country and farming the land. No, but they will be just as controlled as they were back then through what? Technology. And so I think this is where they're trying to lead us.
Yes.
And so in order to get there, you've got to do two things. You've got to crush the spirit of the American people and the Russian people. I
Yeah.
believe that the government of America has already been conquered, but the human spirit here has not been conquered. We still have a majority of people in this country who may not be fully awake, but they do at least have a general sense of what it means to be free. The younger crowd, I would say the majority of them, like under 40, under 35 especially, most of them, not all, but most of them, they've even had their spirit conquered. They don't even know what it means to be free. But
That's
most
right.
of but the older crowd and the middle-aged people, I'd say over 35, over 40 for sure, most of those people, and I know that's a general term, but if even 50% of those people still have an appreciation for freedom and a longing in their heart and their spirit to be free, then the globalists have a big problem on their hands, right?
Right.
And so I think their plan to tackle that problem is, number one, depopulation, and number two, destruction
Yeah.
of that human spirit to be free, especially among Christians, because Christians are subservient to a higher power. Christians are not subservient to a human power if that human authority conflicts with what God says and what the Bible says. And so you've got these two large populations in these two very large countries, Russia and the United States, that still have this spirit of Christianity in them and this longing to be free. And it manifests differently in Russia than it does here, but we don't have time to go into all that.
Sure.
Russian people are more comfortable with a strongman type authoritarian leader like Vladimir Putin. But that
Right.
doesn't mean that they're not Christian and don't want to be left alone to live their lives basically as they want. And so I think the globalists, that's why you see the media, which, as we stated earlier, is 100% captured by the globalists. You see the mainstream corporate media just pummeling us with this anti-Russian propaganda every day. Putin is
Yes.
evil. Russia is evil. And in Russia, they're doing the same thing. America's evil, and and they want those two nations to clash in a direct, open warfare with missiles flying back and forth, hitting U.S. cities, hitting Russian cities, and decimate the populations and of those two countries, and put an end to this Christianity, this Western civilization that has been experimenting with the concept of living free for 250 years. And once they can do that and depopulate the world as well, because there's just too many people to manage in a techno oligarchy, 8 billion people, but you can easily, through the technology, micromanage 1 billion people. And so I think that's the plan, Wes. Depopulate and pit the United States and Russia against each other so that they can destroy each other and open the avenue, pave the way for the new world order moving forward. Mm-hmm. With a digital currency and central bank digital currencies and digital IDs.
Absolutely. And when I heard people shouting with glee in Middle East countries that America and Russia were going to go to war, 10 years ago, after the Mediterranean system and the so-called Arab Spring, after the so-called reset of the Mediterranean basin took place and economies were destroyed, reintroducing slave markets. But there were people excited at the thought that the United States and Russia were going to go to war, because of course causing war inside the Dar al-Harb would be exactly what Dar al-Salam would want to have happen. I mean, it harkens back to the 70s into the 80s when Iraq and Iran were firing scuds at each other. The globalists had both sides fighting each other, or the neocons in the 90s introducing endless wars in the Middle East, like in Iraq, where everybody's constantly fighting, and you've got 10 million dead. The blood is on their hands as they continue to cause chaos. And my wish is that even those who are non-Christians, if you are a liberal or a Democrat or a revolutionary, I wish they would recognize that the waters that they swim in are Christian waters, much like a goldfish exists in a tank of water and doesn't understand it's swimming in water. Still, those who benefit from being in a Christian civilization derive incredible benefits because of the way that this egalitarianism and liberty and freedom are instilled in people at a very young age, and a respect for life, frankly, a respect for human life, the elderly and the unborn. The globalists want to crush our spirits and reduce our celestial freedoms as well as the earthly freedoms, crushing the human spirit. And you see it, unfortunately, in the young, because they don't remember now after this lockdown. They don't remember going to movie theaters or just walking freely down the street without looking over your shoulder.
Right.
The chaos introduced at every aspect of our lives is leading us toward a Hunger Games scenario where everybody's fighting in the streets. It's really bizarre. Okay, so what I did want to talk to reminds me what I wanted to ask you about. What are you seeing happening in Europe? Because we get no news out of France, England, Germany, where people are now fighting. There's the cities have been on fire. The demonstrations and the protests against the globalists, against the World Economic Forum. Nobody's getting that news in North America. And then also in Minnesota, we're in a bubble where even, like, say in Rochester, Minnesota, we don't see what's happening in New York City on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, where you have people, thousands of conquerors marching freely in the streets. Chicago is out of control. There's been fights between Somalis and American blacks in Minneapolis, and then there's violence happening, but that news isn't being shared by the globalists. They don't want us to see that this chaos is already happening. Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah,
Any
isn't
thoughts?
that interesting? Yeah, it's like they want every little microcosm of the population to live inside of its own little bubble, insulated from the rest of not just the rest of the world, but as you're saying, insulated in many cases from what's going on in other parts of the country.
Yeah.
Let's not forget, it was not too terribly long ago that we had a insurgency going on in the western states in Portland and Seattle, where remember they took control of a whole section of a city. They called it what, Chop or something like
Chaz.
Chaz, and then Chop. Yes.
Oh, we had a Chaz autonomous zone in Minneapolis as well. That a friend of mine recently visited and did. It's still there, but it's an autonomous zone where there's no law and order. It's just the local. They've sealed off this area. And he did a photo expose of like how it looks up there now.
Well, could you imagine the big news that it would be nationwide news if a MAGA group created a autonomous zone? Um, I think everyone would hear about that.
It would be like Waco, Texas. It wouldn't last very long. I mean, nobody on our side is really trying to do that. And nobody's forming up the dreaded M word. Nobody's trying to get grand juries started. All of that foolishness is attributed to leftism and leftists.
So
They're
what you
creating.
have is the leftists, Joe Biden and the leftists accusing MAGA of exactly what it is doing. Um, that is a favorite demonic tactic where you accuse your opponent of what you are guilty of doing. And when Biden gave that speech a week or so ago about Trump and how dangerous the Trump followers are, and if Trump gets elected, he will become a dictator. He will start rounding people up. This is what the Biden administration has been doing for 2.5, 3 years. They have been rounding up elderly women who pray outside of abortion clinics.
Yes.
They have been rounding up people who waltzed through the Capitol, unbeknownst to them, committing a crime on January 6, 2021.
Political prisoners, actual
Yes,
political prisoners.
and they recently came out. Assistant Attorney General, Assistant U.S. Attorney came out a week or two ago and said that they are not done arresting people, finding people and arresting them who were at the January 6th event. So if Biden or some other Democrat were to get elected, that would be strung out for another 4 years, arresting Americans. And he even said that we're now focused not just on the people who entered the Capitol building, but those who were on the grounds outside. And so they're gradually expanding the breadth of their investigation to take in all. I think eventually they will criminalize all 1 million people who were at that event, if they are allowed to continue with this. And and Donald Trump, I just wish I could trust that he was what people think he is. But I don't know how you feel about him, but he is an enigma to me because on the one hand, he can sound so good and say all the right things. But then on the other hand, if you look at some of his actions, they seem to play right into the globalist hands. And that January 6th event is a classic example. You can say that he wanted it to be peaceful, and maybe he did. And maybe it was, but that shows an extreme naivety on his part. At best, the man is naive, because he was apparently unaware of just how devious his political opponents were, that they would engage the FBI to have dozens of its assets on the ground fomenting violence, instigating violence, triggering people, triggering the cops. And so Donald Trump is either part of the problem or he's extremely naive and has allowed himself to be manipulated by people who are causing the problems. The division, the rabid divisions in this country. I think it's hard to argue against that Trump has been used to make those divisions, those gaps in our society, those fissions, bigger and more severe than they ever were before.
I value your perspective on that, and I respect what you're saying. And I've had those doubts myself as to the extent to which Trump may be TARP or ring fenced himself on some other level, or being used to expose the silos of opposition to the globalist network. There was a campaign orchestrated to take people out to Washington, and all I ever did was tell people don't go. Anyway, just come to
Right.
our flag. We tried to have a flag rally in Rochester where we drove up and down Broadway. And what happened was the city interfered with the traffic lights to try to break up the motorcade as we went and did our laps on Broadway. And they had the lights all triggered so that they would try to split it up, but it stayed together like a flotilla. And when we were at the north side of town, there was a man who presented himself, and I remember him clearly. He turns up. First time I've ever seen him anywhere, and he says he doesn't have a flag and he wants to buy a car flag. So I offered him one of mine. He said, "How much does it cost?" I said, $6. He handed me a $20 bill, and I was giving him back change, and he said, no, don't worry about it." And I was like, no conservative would. I mean, I paid $6 for the flag. I'm selling it to him for $6. I'm not making any money off the flag. It's a car
Right.
flag you can get at Walmart at that time for $6. And he wouldn't take the change, and then the first thing out of his mouth is, "Hey, let's go occupy something." And I'm like, what? And everybody was quiet. And I looked at him like, what are you talking about? And I was too astonished. Like, what does that mean? Occupy something. I didn't even understand the language he was using, you know?
Yeah.
And we're just trying to have an American flag parade. But he inserted himself into that. And he's turned up this year at a couple of meetings. So my reaction is to stop going to those meetings, and I
Yeah.
just pulled back because I'm not interested in I'm not interested in that at all.
No, I really think,
I
Wes,
use
that
words. I use
yeah,
my mouth, and that I use words, and I use the pen, and that's
right.
dangerous enough, isn't it?
Yeah, I really don't think we're going to take back this country with protest rallies. Um,
No.
I really don't. And I would say the same thing for Europe. We see a lot more of the protest rallies in Europe right now. But
Right.
the globalists expect that. The globalists have a contingency plan for that. 2 years ago, I believe it was the 2022 World Economic Forum meeting at Davos, Klaus Schwab said, we must prepare for an angrier world. Um,
Uh-huh.
they
Uh-huh.
know people are going to get angry. They know people are going to get upset because the globalist policies are very unpopular, right? Uh,
Yeah,
I mean,
very
what if
unpopular.
you look at what the Davos Club is saying? We're going to take away your meat and feed you bugs. We're going to take away your energy. We're going to take away your energy. They call it fossil fuels, which is a propaganda term in itself. And we're going to make you go all electric. Oh, but guess what? The electric grid can't handle all this. So what does that mean? You're going to go without a car, without a vehicle. Your freedom of movement is going to be curtailed. You're not going to be able to heat your home. You're going to freeze during the winter. But oh, don't worry, trust us, everything will be wonderful. You'll own nothing and be happy. So they know we're going to be angry. They know we're not going to be happy. They own the militaries. So I think they can deal with some protests here and there breaking out. What they are deathly afraid of, what they are petrified of, is us becoming what I call ungovernable, meaning we simply ignore any of their laws and do not comply with any of their laws, rules, regulations, or edicts that we consider to be unconstitutional. Get a jab. No, thank you. Put on a mask. No, thank you. Buy an electric car. No, thank you. Um, Feed yourself our processed poison food. No, thank you. I'm going to eat whole foods, stuff that's not been doctored in a lab. And so this is the way that we're going to take back our countries and take back control from the globalists.
I think that you're getting to like the diamond needle point on the vinyl record here. I think you really dialed into something. Us becoming ungovernable. Now, what I've noticed, the language that they're adopting now internationally, and it feeds down into our local compost bulletin newspaper, they're starting to use the word civil and civility. They want civility from us. They want us to be civil. So they're pointing the finger at anyone who's asking questions or asking for data, doing a data practices request, doing a FOIA request. You are being uncivil. They're massaging that word into all kinds of pieces, so-called journalistic pieces. It's television, it's radio, it's print so-called journalism, but it's a print media. Have you been tracking the use of that word civility? I'm going to do a Google search and see if that isn't a Mockingbird media approach. The deploying, it's a deploying strategically of the word civility. It's as if they're calling out in you for you to be on your best behavior and comply.
You are 100% spot on. Yes, that is, if people get nothing else from this podcast, I hope they take away what you just said, because they are trying to appeal to our better angels, right?
Right.
But when you're faced with tyranny, who was it? It was a very famous person said, when faced with tyranny, there is no compromise. There is no peace. You can't make peace with the devil. You can't make peace with your oppressors. You have to know, before you can make that decision, you have to know who your oppressors are. And that's why they try to keep us focused on the left-right paradigm, the Democrats, the Republicans. When all of these globalists were sitting in Davos last week telling us what their plans are for us, all the media here was reporting about was the Iowa caucuses, right?
Right.
The Iowa caucuses, which mean nothing. We already knew the results of the Iowa caucus. There was no surprise whatsoever to that news, and yet that's all they could talk about, while the real powers that be were sitting 2,000 miles away telling us how they plan to dominate us in the years ahead.
Absolutely. And the Democrats already knew they weren't going to get to choose a candidate through a caucus process, and the Republicans are also not going to be able to choose a candidate through a caucus process. In a couple of states, they're introducing the concept of so-called primaries now and supplanting the primary process, introducing a primary election that'll be governed by a Democrat Secretary of State, Simon, so that our caucus process is rendered meaningless, because the numbers will go behind the curtain, and then on March 5th at some point later on, they're going to give us the results of the primary. Well, nobody's registered as a Republican or a Democrat. So the DFL well, by the way, DeSantis pulled out, so it won't make a difference. But I bet you in Minnesota, I'll bet you a dime that Nikki Haley wins the primary. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, the
But
globalists seem to be in love with Nikki Haley, don't they?
yeah,
But I
Donald,
don't see. I just don't see her getting any traction. But if Trump chooses her as his VP, then we do know that Trump is sold out to the globalists.
I agree with you there. I would agree with you there. And he didn't learn anything from what happened with
Right.
Mike Pence, or that
Exactly.
was the
Exactly.
political theater. Could he be an actor on a level that we can't even? It's so good. He's such a television guru that we've all been duped. It's the thoughts crossed my mind.
Yes,
Meanwhile,
I think it's crossed the mind of all thinking individuals. You know, most people just look at the news and they watch the news like people would watch a football game. Uh, they, I'm serious.
yes, I
They
know.
look at each. It would be like most people when they watch a football game. What do? They look at each individual play and they say, "Oh, that was a great play. Uh, great, great call by the coach." But they don't look at the wider strategy, right?
Right.
Uh, and you don't when you're watching the game at the bar with a beer. Uh,
Yeah.
you're not thinking about what is the coach's bigger overall strategy. You're just watching each play and getting excited about it or getting bummed out about it, right?
Right.
Um, this is how people watch the news. It really is unbelievable. They never stop to consider what is the bigger strategy? What are they trying to distract me from?
Even if they are watching the news is still just part of the flashing lights on the cave wall. It's just a distraction from the reality going on behind you.
Yes.
Plato's cave. Also, it's bread and circuses in a declining, empire. It's just bread and circuses. You've got your football game and you're slurping some corn syrup. Is my favorite way to put it.
Yes.
But watching the news, there's no critical analysis or even looking at the way that a story is reported in the same way. The Mockingbird media. I used to love the Google aggregator. The news aggregator would allow you to see how the same story had the same headline, just a different byline, but had all the paragraphs were the same in
Yes.
5,000 different media outlets globally at the same day at the same time. And the Google News aggregator would let you copy and then search for text to see which other news outlets had plagiarized the exact same phrasing or sentence. I had fun playing with that. Nothing radicalized me like seeing how an English paper in the Punjab or Pakistan had the same phrasing as one in India and then one in England and France. If there's an English speaking press in even of course Hong Kong, but there's English speaking press in Japan and other countries around the world. So you can take that phrase and you can see, well, there's no accident here, and nobody's crediting the Associated Press, but the message is going out to everyone, so the indoctrination is the same. So the conversations at the water cooler are all the same. There's no
Right.
critical analysis.
And no critical analysis. And now they use the algorithms to suppress and to beat down and suppress and hide any headlines that may vary from what you're saying, from the pack journalism that we see. And so if you do a search in whether Google, DuckDuckGo, Bing, they're all pretty much the same. And unless you know the exact headline of an alternative media source, that article will not come up in your search.
That's right. That's right. You search for one and then you find them all.
Except for the one you're looking for.
Yeah, and it's beautiful how they manage to make stories vanish. We
Yes.
have that. I've called that out with the Rochester Post Bulletin many times. They take down a story that they realize was wrong or in error. They go back and they edit crucial parts where there's a reveal in the story that they hadn't meant
Yes.
to reveal. And I have some solid examples of that are fascinating. I mean, I'd like to talk with you at some point about the influence of the so-called faith community, the way that that community has been infiltrated by the globalist, the new religion of compassion, as it ties into religion that will be the corporate model of a good citizen involving civility.
Well, I have a great example for you on that. Look at the COVID vaccines. What did they do in terms of at Event 201, which was kicked off in October 2019, about 2 months before COVID hit the world? They talked about recruiting what they called, quote, trusted sources. And these trusted sources would be in the business world, the political world, and the religious world. And if you look at what they did with the COVID vaccines, they immediately enlisted the two most visible, most authoritative, most respected voices in the Catholic and Protestant worlds to push the vaccines. That was Pope Francis on the Catholic side and Franklin Graham on the Protestant side. These two men allowed themselves to be used by the globalists to push the clot shots because they were seen as the two most authoritative, respected voices in the religious world, in the Christian world, one Catholic, one Protestant. I'm sure they did the same thing with the Muslim world and got the most respected imams. The Muslim world is not as monolithic as the Christian world. Like I can't think of one single leader who leads the Muslim world like I can Pope Francis and Franklin Graham. Maybe they're out there, but I don't know who the equivalent of those are. But I guarantee you, whoever they are, they were pushing the clot shots.
Oh, definitely. And the churches were deployed here to shame people. I was just talking with a devout Catholic who had converted from Lutheranism. I was speaking with him yesterday, and he said that he was done with his Catholic church at the point where the priest had said, now, if you are unvaccinated or uncomfortable with your vaccination status, you have to sit over in this separated area away from the rest of the participants.
Yes.
And that's when and he helped build that church. That's when he got up and walked out. He was on the construction. He actually was a founding member of that congregation. So, but there's all kinds of people who were subjected to that from the pulpit, the pressure to get vaccinated, the pressure to wear masks. I know I have family members who were so duped into sitting in like little ladies' aid societies where they were making masks. They were making little masks of different cloth material, like the way you'd knit a sweater for a soldier or something in World War I or II.
They thought they were doing a gift for humanity. Yes. I've got to run, Wes, to another interview, but I've really enjoyed the interview, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
I sure hope so, Leo Hohmann. And I'm going to put it in the notes below this, all of the contacts to your preferred social media. And thank you very much. I hope everybody looks up his writings online, follow those links, and check out the work of Mr. Leo Hohmann. Again, thank you very much, sir. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, my honor. Thank you so much, Wes. Take care.